This conference will now be recorded.
So the conference is being recorded, you would have just heard there. So this is the second webinar in our series of Zero Pollutions. We've run 3 conferences so far, and as I said, this is our second webinar. So in terms of today, what we're going to be covering is we're going to have 2 presentations today, and there's a chance to ask questions, and I'll go through in a second about how you can ask those questions within the GoToMeeting chat box. We're going to have 1 presentation to start with from Steve Robson from Northumbrian Water, and then that'll be followed by a presentation by Gary from ATI. Now, why are zero pollution still being talked about? There's still a hugely relevant topic for today, not least with the passing recently of the Environment Act 2021 and the obligations to have a reduction plan for those storm overflows as well. And throughout the pandemic, there's been a real focus on wild swimming, for example, and the cleanliness of our bathing waters, rivers, and so on. So it's a real focus of the government, but also the public as well. And seeing all the great work that companies are doing is really heartening and interesting to see as well. So these webinar series and the conferences are really about sharing this knowledge and this learning, so the water sector as a whole can grow and learn together. So in terms of the setup today, so we have GoToMeeting. Please do remain on mute during the presentations. If you would like to ask a question, please use the chat function. You'll see a speech bubble within the toolbar. If you press on that, you'll be able to enter a message. You can select, if there's a question particularly for the organisers, for the ISLE staff, please do select ISLE, Megan or Chris within that drop-down list, and you'll send a message directly to them. Otherwise, we'll go through the questions at the end of each presentation, or rather at the end of both presentations, and you'll have a chance to pose your questions and your thoughts, comments to the presenters as well. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Steve Robson. So Steve is from Northumbrian Water, as you can see. He is a customer manager in pollution and has been in that role since 2017. Steve has been at Northumbrian for 32 years, always working within civil engineering and within sewers. So Stephen, over to you, please.
Just checking to make sure, sorry, this is a new platform for me as well, so just checking to make sure I've got my screen on here.
Yeah, you can see a presentation, just put it into a presentation.
Okay. Okay, is that
perfect? Thank you.
Is that good to go?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity for being able to speak today. Like I said, I'm Steve Robson. I've been at Northumbrian Water for too long, really. But I've been in post as a pollution manager for since 2017, and I just wanted to talk about some stuff that we've come across and what we've found in terms of being in post since that time. Just got some contents that I want to talk through. So just about pollution performance in 2016 and where we were. Some of the operational activities that we've been focusing on. Some storm overflow for performance in terms of where we are as a company. Some third-party investigations and pollution performance information so far year to date. And then a little bit touching on the Innovation Festival about where we want to go and what we're trying to do in the future. So in 2016, this is for sewer networks. So when I talk about sewer networks, I'm talking about gravity networks and CSOs which have screens, not the powered type. So just essentially stuff with no electrical and mechanical operations. So in 2016, we had 2 Category 1 events, 4 Cat 2s, 90 Cat 3s, and in terms of the self-reporting target, we were well below target as well. So there was a big process change when I became in post in 2017 that we had to go through with the teams. So the things that we looked at, we wanted to try and give the team some focus. You know, when I first became in post, I was talking to some of the teams, the tech support advisors, and they didn't really have focus. They were dealing with some flooding issues, they were dealing with some pollution issues. probably never really completing and focusing on one or the other. So we decided to do a functional split with the flooding and pollution teams. So currently in the North team, which is my Cramlington team, I'll have 10 tech support advisors working in that area and 1 team leader. And in the South, I'll have the same, that's in the Thornaby area. In the North, we deal with an area from Sunderland all the way up to Berwick. And the south part of the region is from Sunderland down towards Teesside. So it gives you a little bit of flavour of the areas that we cover. Within the pollution teams as well, we also did a further split. So we have had a reactive pollution team and a proactive pollution team. And obviously the reactive team were actually going out to incidents, investigating incidents. The proactive team were looking at all the data behind pollution information that we had. So we were in quite a good place in terms of sewer level monitors that we have in the catchment. And we were looking at that data in terms of understanding performance of each asset. So we're doing lots of activity around that type of work. One of the first things was a bit of a mindset change with the team leaders, the tech support advisors, and the sewer maintenance operatives. So we wanted a lot of ownership within the teams, and the team leaders, we wanted them to understand each incident and why it happened, and ask questions of the tech support advisors, share learning. We also set some clear expectations about what we wanted from each individual incident and the depth of rigour that we wanted to do in terms of the investigations. We also set some expectations with the sewer maintenance operatives about maintaining assets and what we expected in terms of investigations from the incidents themselves as well. So we looked at in-depth investigations into pollution incidents, and what we wanted to really do was understand the cause and have any repeats avoidance. So we didn't want to see any repeats come back in, and that was a real problem for us in the South region. It kind of felt like they lost the way a little bit in terms of the number of jobs that were coming in. So that was somewhere where we really wanted to focus on. We had a sewer level monitor team that worked for us out of our central area, and they were looking at storm overflows and operation. And they also looked at a storm overflow operating list in terms of top issues lists. And they were given to our proactive team to basically carry out investigations into each incident, into each asset, and understand the performance of each asset. So there may be some Alpheus units or some flow control devices that maybe needed some maintenance. So we were looking at all those type of things, and that was really around pollution avoidance. That proactive team as well also looked at bathing waters, and we've got 35 assets which would keep bathing waters, and they were doing lots of activity around the bathing waters to avoid pollution incidents. We were doing loads of CCTV and investigation prior to bathing water season to make sure the assets should be performing as designed. The sewer level monitor team, just to give you a flavour as well, they've raised 780 jobs this year, and they were alarms relating to reactive alarms, 80% alarms or 100% alarms, or rising trends. So they're basically doing all that, and that again is pollution avoidance. So we've got PPM review, which is planned preventative maintenance. So we've got assets that we'll go to on a regular basis where we'll do maintenance. And they tend to be related to pollution or flooding activity. So we do a full review of those and make sure that we got the right assets with the right kit at the right time, and the proactive team did all that work alongside that. As we were going as well, we're looking at innovations. So how could we get better performance? We came up with some blockage catchers, Armstrong baskets, which provided secondary screening on some of the CSOs. We've also got a pollution app, which is our Coruscant app, which got better data from site, and the handovers around the investigations came in a lot quicker, which would improve things. So just in terms of storm overflow operation and maintenance, this is just a flavour of what we would see within the office. So this is just a sewer level monitor doing its job, running at about 5% there, normal flow, and you can see a spike during rainfall events, and that's just touching the 100% alarm. We've got two alarms typically set, which is at 80 and 100. And obviously what we're trying to do, if there's any blockages at 80% alarm, the sewer level monitor teams will be sending out crews they'll be dispatched and basically clearing the blockages before they become a problem. We've got just over 1,300 CSOs, so that gives you a bit of an idea. And typically our CSOs on average are spilling about 10 to 15 times per year. We used to have a bit of a static CSO planned preventive maintenance schedule. So each asset would have been allocated a monthly visit or a 3-monthly visit or 6 monthly. We decided that potentially we should change that and use the sewer level monitors to drive the performance and maintenance. And what we're seeing from that is a lot better performance in terms of the CSOs and the screenings at the outfalls. And also the actual static screens are performing in a better way. So what we use the sewer level monitors to drive the maintenance. Each asset's placed on a yearly PPM, planned preventive maintenance, and then we'll raise subsequent jobs in between that if the screens get underwater for 2 hours. We also went out to the sewer maintenance teams as well, and we're pretty clear in terms of a standard operating procedure of what we wanted from each asset and what we expected from each maintenance visit, which was well received. And we've seen a lot better performance in terms of our CSOs because of that. I just wanted to touch on some third-party investigations, some more in-depth investigations that we asked the tech support advisors to do. And this is a typical incident that we would have had in 2016, 2017, maybe early on, that we would have accepted as a Cat 3. So we've asked the teams not only to deal with the problem at source, but also to look upstream and maybe downstream where there's other problems going on. So in this particular issue, we're utilising the blockage catcher, which is the rod you can see on the first picture there. And there's a bit of black plastic pipe which has been removed from the blockage. This was actually causing a Cat 3 incident at the time. We then traced upstream, so about a mile away, to a small village called Medburn. And you can see there's a little bit of an area there of 6 detached houses which have been connected into a sewer. What we also found was that there's a black plastic pipe alongside it at the manhole, which had been cut. And we looked at the black plastic pipe that was removed from the blockage, the black plastic pipe that was lying on the ground next to the manhole, and it was a perfect match in terms of what had been fitted. So essentially they just put some connections in, and you can just see on the side there, I don't know if you can see it, that essentially is 6 separate rising main connections coming into one chamber, and you can see a timber frame there, basically trussing those connections down, which is unacceptable really. And we managed to get that to third party. But what that also allowed us to do is to feedback to the developer in terms of their good practice, and also recharge our time, which is important because it costs us a lot of money to do investigations. And that also allowed us to demonstrate to the agency that we're in control of the network, we're in control of the system, we understand its operation. And they had confidence in us to say, oh, you've demonstrated third party and allocated to a third party incident. So those are kind of typical stuff that we've been doing. So in terms of 2021, we've had 23 Cat 3s up to the end of October, which have been approved by the agency, and we've been through a monthly process with them, going through each incident as it's been coming in. 7 of the Cat 3s related to storm overflow operation. Out of those, we've had 4 which have been started as consented spills in rainfall, and then have changed. So that could have been, and we've got a little bit of a gap here where we probably need to improve in terms of the operations, and have caused a blockage after the rainfall event. We've not picked them up in time. 1 was a blockage which came in as an 80% alarm, and by the time we got there, it turned into 100%. So obviously we're self-reporting those. And 2 were what we call amenity Cat 3s. So this is when a customer's called in and noticed that there's litter at the outfall, and the agency have allocated 2 Cat 3s to those this year. 1 was from a dual manhole. We've had 1 incident from a pipe bridge failure and 13 from a sewer near watercourse. We've got lots of foul sewers which run alongside watercourses, especially in the southern area where they've transferred basically to new treatment works, and they can be susceptible to blockages and potential the blind spots for us. So we've been working hard with our strategy team to look at sewers near watercourses and get a programme of works together. It's exactly the same with dual manholes and pipe bridges as well. So all in all, in the journey from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 20 to now, and all those things that were put in place and the processes that were put in place and the rigour has allowed us to get really low numbers in terms of the pollutions, and it's made us industry leading so far, which is great. And obviously we want to continue to do that. Probably where we've got to now, we've probably plateaued a little bit in terms of where we are, and we need to then look at other things in terms of making improvements, and that helps us with the strategy team. But also just touch on the Innovation Festival. So at Innovation Festival 21, we're looking at super CSOs. So obviously we've had the issues from this year, and we'll continue to have those issues unless we do something different. So we're looking at maybe some CCTV at outfalls, some other sensors at CSOs, basically some smart monitors at our assets, looking at trying to utilise the teams in a better way. So we have CSO maintenance focused teams that would just deal with CSOs. We've got loads of data on CSO performance, and we're looking at a dashboard as well where we can rank each asset and understand maintenance and top issues and all that type of stuff. And when it was CCTV last, all that kind of information that we have. So it's going to be more targeted PPM. So this is just early days, and this is what we're talking about. And hopefully it's going to drive reduced pollutions for us. And that's the end of the presentation. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
Great, thank you very much. We can address a couple of questions now, and then if people have got further comments and other questions, we can have another session after the next presentation. But we do have one here from Simon Chanko. And the question is, in your opinion, what do you think was the biggest influence in the improvement in performance since 2016?
I think focused and rigour around investigations and allowing the teams to focus on the right areas of the business. The kind of were a little bit, do I do this pollution? Do I do this flooding incident? I've got this other thing to do. This customer call came in, and it was allow them to give them the focus to keep on the pollution incidents and the investigations. And it was the rigour that we put around the investigations themselves. We increased the coverage of what the tech support advisors were doing, and then we were putting fixes in. So we were avoiding repeats, and we're making sure those fixes were put in place. So probably the biggest things.
Thank you. So it's all around empowering your workforce to be able to put those fixes in there and then. And
definitely, yeah, and focusing on them, keeping a record, making sure they're in place. Obviously, they're getting the contractors on board as well in terms of we use ESH and getting those guys involved as well to make sure they're on the same page as where we're going. You know, it was trying to keep all those people engaged with the process.
So with COVID and the pandemic, has any of your working practices changed or been hampered through the pandemic?
They probably changed a little bit. We're working from home predominantly, so they have changed in that respect. But it hasn't allowed us in terms of have any dip in performance. So we're probably meeting more on Teams or doing things in a slightly different way, but we're still doing the site investigations as we should be. We're still engaging correctly with the contractors. We're still engaging with the agency. But probably the biggest thing that we have had in terms of the changes, the agency give us a lot more jobs, or it feels like they are, because they're locked in and they're not coming out. So we've been on site more probably than what we ever have been.
Yeah, thank you. Got one more question before we go to the next presentation. And this is probably a very big question, but what do you think the future of your operations will be with the Environment Act?
Wow, right. I might look at James McLean. Is James McLean on here as well? James might give us a hand with this. But I guess in terms of the Act, we have to look at performance in terms of CSOs and assets. We need to be thinking about things in a different way. We've got DWMP, which is obviously ongoing, where we're looking at taking out surface water from assets, and I think obviously is going to be a big focus in terms of pollution incidents and frequency of spills from storm overflows, which we'll have to reduce.
Great, thank you. I think in the discussion,
James, do you want to come in there?
Sorry, just I mean, just to be determined. There's a lot in that. There's a lot of duties now on water companies in there, and directly with DEFRA. So how the agency involved in that as well. But certainly, you know, when we're going to near real-time spills from where we are now, that's going to be a significant sort of jump, and sort of water quality monitoring. So more data, more transparency, but with that, I guess is the sort of interpretation of that, and how that sort of impacts on our pollution performance and long term. Yeah, good points.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really interesting topic, and like you say, you know, we'll find out more in the future as it gets implemented and the measures put in place. I'm sure we're going to touch upon the Environment Act after the next presentation, but I'd like to, if you want to stop sharing your screen, Stephen, I'd like to invite our next speaker to start sharing his screen. So we have Gary. So Gary is a founding partner of ATI UK. It's a company that works in smart water networks, innovation, data analysis, electrochemical gas detection, and water quality instrumentation. So Gary, I'll hand over to you. We can see your screen. You want to put yourself off mute? Still can't hear you. You're still muted, Gary.
How's that? Can you hear me? Ooh, what's happening there?
There's a real echo. I'm not sure. Are you logged on twice, Gary?
I might be logged on twice. Can you log me off there? Is that better?
I've kicked one of you off, so I think you should be good.
Thank you for that. It's a little bit like Stephen, where this is a new format for me, but not the usual teams. There you go. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you first of all for this opportunity to talk to you and to meet you. I think it flows quite nicely after what Stephen was just saying as well about things that are coming up in the future. So if I start off by saying that there's been a lot of talk in the past about how you monitor or smart monitor things as we go forward in sewers. And from a monitoring standpoint...
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. Could you put your presentation on full screen, please? You put it into present mode, it should.
Where do I go for that?
So if you go right down at the bottom on your PowerPoint,
Yeah.
Screen. Yeah.
No?
Long. Next one. There you go. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So how do we, from a monitoring standpoint, how do we optimize sewer network performance? And in light of what we just touched on, the new EA Act and everything else coming along, how do we get that information out there better for the water companies to deal with, and also for the public awareness, which is where I think people are looking to go. And first of all, I think it's worth stating that it's been said recently by a number of quite senior people that this technology doesn't exist. And I think it's fair to say that that's not strictly true. It does exist. You can get all this information and you can get it together, and you can utilize it effectively from a water company standpoint, and also get it out into the public domain, and in a sensible way that's not confusing. So the water sector itself recognizes that as we move forward, soft infrastructure or data is going to become very, very important. And that's probably the area of where I stand of the most excitement, because that's all about sensors technology, unifying all that technology and bringing it all together in a unified way. And the industry's been very aware of this for a long time, and it challenged us all in the supply chain, because that's where I'm coming from, the supply chain, to come up with innovation. But the industry recognizes that innovation by itself, across all these different technologies that you've got, is not easy to get, and there's no silver bullet. There's not one company provider out there that can bring it all together. So the industry put the challenge out to us as supply chain of innovation by collaboration. And that's what we've been doing. We've been all talking to each other, trying to find ways where we can bring our technology together. So I'm going to move on from there. Now, moving on to the next screen, the next slide. Next. So for those of you that don't know me, some of you do, I'm Gary Tabor, and as was said by Carolyn, I was one of the founding people in ATI UK, and we're a business that is in quite a number of water companies across all sorts of areas of technology, from water quality monitoring through to gas detection. But some time ago, some people looked at what the future of instrumentation and what's happening. And it's fair to say that the industry itself, our customers, don't really want to buy monitors anymore. They actually want the data that the monitors provide them with, because that's the real value. The monitor itself is a necessary thing to have to get all that data. And so I find myself in an industry, after 30 years of being in this industry, is probably the biggest boom experience that it's going through. And that's digitalization of the water sector and bringing in things like smart networks and smart monitors and delivering all this data to you. And that's been noticed by a lot of other people out there. And our technology was spotted by somebody else. And we were actually, as a business, we were a private business. We were acquired in January of this year by an American company called Badger Meter. And we were acquired along with another name that people might actually know, which is S-Scan, an air water quality company based in Austria. And we're sister brands now underneath this umbrella of Badger Meter. To our customers, nothing's changed. We're still ATI, but we are part of a bigger group with bigger ambitions to actually bring together things like flow, which is their area of expertise, and also quality as well. But I don't want to be said advertising, but that's where we are. So next slide. Now, how do we arrive at a solution that the water sector can actually use in terms of sewers and reporting all the data of water quality, bringing that in a way that you can use it, and also providing that information in a way that the public can understand it? And my own experience is that a lot of water companies actually approach things in quite an old-fashioned way historically. They go to one provider of technology and they get that partner in, and that partner works with a particular silo of that industry, of that water company, and then they provide a solution. So you tend to find that we know a lot about abstraction of water, and so a provider like ourselves will deal with the people who look after abstraction and recording of that. Then we know a lot about actually production of water and treating water, and we again would deal with another silo. But now when we come to network monitoring, that's slightly different because it involves a lot more. And so for me, the experience that I've gained over the last 6 years in this, seeing how this market's developed, is that the first thing is that a company needs to take ownership. Take ownership of the whole thing in a holistic way. And I've said it before, I'm not an advocate of consultants, but I am here to say that consultants play a very key role here, because they're the people that can bring everything together. If you think about it, one way you can look at it is it's the same as going shopping for your family for everything. Historically, you used to go to a butcher's to get your bread, to get your meat, your fishmongers to get your fish, and then a baker's, and so on and so forth. But nowadays we don't. We go to one unified place to get everything, a supermarket. It's an old paradigm, but it works. And the industry can earn a lot from that. Because if you go to a consultant, that consultant can be that source of getting everything. And the first thing a consultant can do is come into the business and audit the business. Audit the business in a way the business wants to be unified. They want to take ownership, they want to deal with it, and they want to introduce all this data and bring it all together in a very unified way. So that's the one thing they can do. And then what they can do is unify the supply chain. And that's where we get to the green box, where you have a utility underneath the heading of a collaborative innovation partner, which could be your consultant. You can bring all of these different technologies together. And by doing so, you can actually have what you want. So individually, no, there's not one size fits all, there's not one silver bullet. But when you use it in this way, you can get everything you need, and it's all available today. So have I gone too far there? I want to look at a real life application now, and that is using multiple sensor technology. Just a minute ago, Stephen was talking about the next step and where we need to go to next, or the sector needs to go to next, and here's a company, and what technology you bring in there. And you can bring in all the different technologies that you want. You can bring in water quality, you can bring in flow, level, duration of flow, rainfall, road conditions, everything. You need to bring them in, and that's where I sit in my technology, because I'm a sensor provider. But I'm not the only one. There's lots of it. There's lots of others out there that are very, very good and been around for a long time, and they're well proven. But it's bringing them all together, because when you bring them all together, you get a far more granular picture of what's going on throughout your network, whether that be distribution for water, or in this case, for sewers. But you then need to unify them all. And that generally is somebody else. That's going to be an RTU provider and a battery, because a lot of these are going to be in remote places. So they're going to need battery performance. You can have mains, but increasingly there's more battery reliance. So you need a good RTU. Now, the industry is very conservative there. It's been around, or it's been in that market for a long time, and there are people that are already well sort of like settled in the market with frameworks. So the sensors, if we look at the first one, the sensors have to be agnostic, and they have to be able to connect into the choice of RTU that the customer has. And then that information has to be recorded locally, and it has to be then transmitted to an intermediate platform. And that intermediate platform is a localized one that the RTU supplier can provide. And on there, you can do things like short-term analysis. You can do pollution matrix index, a way of actually taking all that data, putting it all together, and presenting it in such a way that's easy for you to see, for a water company to see, and so they can act upon it. And also present the data in such a simple way that it can be presented to the public as well. And there's things out there called pollution matrix index, a very simple thing that I'm going to talk about in a moment. After that, you can then API it, that information out from there onto a much larger platform. Lots of water companies now are embarking on some major digitalization of their networks, and they want to see everything. And that's where you get some of the bigger players involved, and you can have AI, machine learning, and you can actually produce digital twins, and you can actually become more of a smart business. So I'm going to try and go through all of that for you in my own way. So we look at the next slide. So if we look at the data comes out, it goes into that platform, that localized platform, and we look at a simple solution for you, a pollution matrix index, which allows you to see what's going on in a network, but it also can be transferred off of here. It can go to the EA and it can go onto the Act there so the public can see it. So in this very simple solution, we're looking at something like septicity, the formation of septicity. We can look at all water quality, but that would be something a bit more complex than this. But so what I've tried to do is break it down so you can see what, if we were just looking at septicity, a simple method of measuring the formation of septicity is ORP. It's been around a long time. This isn't not brand new information. It's been around, it's very well proven. And you can see that when septicity starts to go down, when ORP starts to go down, that means we are moving towards a septic reaction. And then when you bring in all the other data, like flow and duration of flow, we actually can see that we can have a pollution index. And if you look over to the left-hand side, what you can see is that index can be graded. So what we've got is the pollution index is the green line, and that can actually go up. And when it goes up, because these things converge to give you more information, what you actually get is alarm points. And they can be early warning alarm points for a water company to be more reactive and proactive about fixing things, but they can also register then in other places so they can be recorded. But that's a very simple solution that's out there at the moment, and that requires two technologies, just ORP sensors, an RTU, a battery, an intermediate data platform to put it all on. And that's very simple to do, and it's around and it's available now. But it does mean collaboration of different technology providers. So how does it work? How does that pollution index system work? Well, in simple terms, what it means is you can arrive at quite a toxic water quality, which could give you one value. But because you've got a high flow and a long duration, you're actually diluting the toxicity of that water quality a little bit more. So you get one figure. Conversely, you could have a different toxicity. You can have a higher flow and a higher duration, and you could end up at the same number. But that's just using a very simple matrix to make that work. So there we go on that one. And then, as I said, you can take that information from there, which is very simple, and you can put it up onto a much bigger platform, an AI platform or a machine learning platform, where you can go from being reactive to proactive. And if you bring in all the other data, rainfall and everything else that might be coming along at the same time, you can actually start to predict. You can start providing more insights into your network in a greater way, and you can start optimizing your operation. Now, I just want to talk about the different people that are involved in this, because I'm very conscious that I'm not here to sell things, but just that very simple system that you've seen there involves sensors from people like myself and other people. We're not the only people around. It involves the RTU providers. In this instance, I will name check them. There's people like Technilog, and there's also people like Metasphere. And these people are very active in this market, and they also themselves are very open, allowing other data to go through there. They're not, not closed systems. And they can provide you with all sorts of localized data analysis that you've seen there, like the pollution index monitor. And then you can go get involved with people and your AI, people like Royal Haskonin, and I gave you an example of some of their stuff there, where they are actually taking lots and lots of data from lots and lots of different sensors in different areas and bringing it all together to give you that digital twin. So there you are. Innovation is out there. All this can be done for you, but it can only be done by collaboration. with lots of supply chain providers, and it can deliver a unified technology for you to make your systems smarter. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Gary. So we do have one question, and I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you first, Gary, and then I'm also going to ask it to Stephen, and it's around the workforce. So what, digital transformation and the use of data and AI and so on, clearly it's got benefits, but what is the impact on the workforce? So I guess there's two aspects here.
Yeah.
Do we have the right skills within the workforce, and what are the positive and negative impacts on them? So to you first, Gary.
Yeah, and that is a very good question, and it's one of the I think that when you present this type of data early on to a water company, they get very nervous because they've got a duty of care. You've got large workforces, but I believe that the amount of data we need to study right now is much bigger, and I would actually say that we don't have enough people. Also, we've got some very clever people within the water sector that test water on a regular basis, take samples. But we're using them in a very ineffective way. We're asking them to drive around, taking samples. It's not environmentally friendly nowadays to do that. And it only gives us a snapshot in what happened before. It's not real time. But if we bring all this data back, those same people have got the skills to actually understand this water quality information and all this data and data analytics. We've got hydrologists. They're all there. If they're unified in a data way that unifies everything together, all these people can be employed and actually add more value to the company. And it's just shifting the paradigm from, as I call it, the old-fashioned way we've done things with valves and going and running around taking samples, and moving onto a digital way, bringing all that information back in real time and allowing those people that you've got within the workforce to actually look at it, analyze it more in a different way, and enhance their contribution actually to the company.
Stephen, have you got anything to add?
Sorry?
Yeah,
To Stephen.
We have a sewer level monitor team set up at Northumbrian Water, and they've been quite well established since 2015, 2016, when we first started installing monitors. And it's only a team of 3 people who are looking at alarms, and it's probably, it works day to day, but when there's a storm event or there's heavy rainfall, which we live in the north, it could get quite wet. I do feel for them a bit because they've got to basically handball alarms and make sure that the alarms are genuine and which alarms turn into blockages. And I did touch on it on my presentation about some CSOs which have turned out to be started as consented spills and turned into unconsented spills because they've become blockages. And that is a weakness within our water company, for those to review 200, 300, 400 alarms that they see and establish which ones are genuine and which ones have turned into an unconsented. And there's probably a little bit of a gap with us with that type of thing. So that's stuff we need to improve on.
It's for me, Stephen, it's about managing those alarms as well. I mean, what you want is a situation where everything's managed. It's got you can see it all on one screen or a couple of screens, and 90% of the time, everything should be working fine.
Yeah.
It's when things start to go wrong that then you're starting seeing alarms going off, and it's seeing the patterns and the pattern recognition that allows you to manage them better. And that's where you need that greater analytics input. The more data you've got, you can actually see things happening. And then eventually, as I said, the utopian view is to get to this sort of predictive situation. So when you know there's storm events coming along and you know the severity, when things actually start and they move into your area, you can actually see rainfall. It doesn't arrive all at once in one area, it migrates along. You can actually see these things, these patterns starting to appear. And the more information you've got, and I'm not the expert in this area, people like Royal Husqvarna, people like that devise all these systems, can actually deliver more predictively, and then that allows you to then go to your workforce and be more focused about where they go instead of running off in different directions, as you say.
Yeah.
We have another question, and this time for you. It's to Gary, but actually, again, I think both of you can answer this, but I'll start with you, Gary. You talked about collaboration across the industry. What needs to change to enable that, to make that collaborative working business as usual?
Okay, well, I think that the sector recognises it. They put a lot of money aside to it. I mean, there's there's 400 million pounds, as I know, been put aside to actually make us approach it differently. This is a big industry going forward. And it's not just a UK thing. It's global. It's very, very global. And historically, from a supply chain perspective, technology, we normally ring fence everything. We like to own it. We want to be able to give you an end-to-end solution that's ours. Why do we do that? It's protectionism. That's what it is. It's protectionism. And the supply chain has to park its ego at the door and say, we can't deliver all of it. We make sensors for water quality. I'm not an expert in RTUs. I'm not an expert in batteries. I'm not an expert in getting data onto a platform. I'm certainly not an expert in analytics and bringing all that data together. I'm just one component. And until the industry or the supply chain industry recognizes that, this will be slow. But that's where the consultant comes in, because the consultant has that overarching thing that he can go out to the market and bring everything together and unify it together. If you think about some of the big projects that are being announced, I mean, you are announcing some very big investments in this type of area going forward. I know Yorkshire are, Thames are already embarking on it, and they're using consultants in a very good way to actually do that, to unify it across all the different silos within the water company, so you deliver exactly what the water company need, but externally as well, banging heads together and bringing people together and saying, look, it needs to be agnostic, you need to be open sourced, otherwise you can't build this thing.
Yeah. So I think with increased information and data, we will naturally almost see that collaboration happen. Stephen, have you got anything to add on that?
I think in terms of water companies, the way we set up our contracts kind of to protect us in the contract, that kind of sets us up almost to be working silos, almost the way that they're set up. But I mean, one thing in Northumbrian Water which we do well is the innovation festival kind of activity that we do once a year, and that, you know, we all come together within the business and try and target areas where we think we need to focus on. And that's quite a good platform for us then to take ideas forward and what we need to do. But sometimes we do set ourselves up to fail, almost in the way that the contracts are set up. It can be a challenge.
Carolyn, I know that.
To work through.
Yeah, Carolyn, I know that. I think Danny O'Connor's online. He might be able to shed light on how they're approaching it from their perspective and how they're going broader to get lots of different suppliers in for different things. But it is happening. You know, some companies are very forward thinking, and that's what they're doing. Maybe Danny can comment. I don't know.
I can see you're online, Danny. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself.
I've called you out now. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Yeah, you're right, Gary. The approach has been very different. Certainly from a commercial point of view, and I think that's probably one area that all companies will need to kind of sit down with commercial and get their heads around. You know, I suppose in the past we've been very focused correctly on having frameworks where they're required, contracts where they're required. That this new approach to the wastewater monitoring, I think, has had to change some of that. I'm not privy to all of the details of it, but it certainly wasn't a right. Well, we're forecasting it's worth X million, therefore we need to write up a contract. I think what we did do is we sort of we worked with Jacobs right at the beginning, who were the main consultant on this, so you've hit a very good point on that one. And they've worked to pull a number of things together. I think one possible difference might be in that because of the speed of the project and because of the need of it, we weren't really able to overemphasize the this idea of being sort of open with technologies. It's fair to say that you could drop in whatever you wanted on it. It is instruments, it's data, RTUs, putting them into some magic software. But I think the bigger change really has been setting up almost like a brand new massive team to actually do something with this data. And one of the things I would say is that if anyone's hoping that there's some kind of magic app that you stick on the top and all your problems go away, I can honestly say that is not going to happen. You need people who understand what the data is telling you. You need subject matter experts, certainly from hydraulics. And then you need doers as well. And you need to collect a lot more information than you're probably used to. So if you, for example, someone raised a job to go and look at something, you'd be, in the past, probably you might get a report back, but it'd be quite, let's just say, the value of that report wouldn't be much because it would go somewhere, the job's been done, and that's it. The data, the value inherent in that visit to go and resolve something hasn't added any extra value. I think the new way of working is much different to that. And I would say for the water industry as a whole, I've come from nuclear and oil and gas. It's a bit of a kick up the bum, long needed. This idea that you can sort of drift around and and do things, but not actually see any value in recording stuff. It's always seen, I think, in the past as, it's extra work that I could ideally do with not doing, or I'll do as little as possible. But now that we're actually collecting more data via this team and it's quite well controlled, we're hoping to see a lot more value. But it's a long project. It's probably in reality going to be 2 or 3 years before we saturate the wastewater networks out with monitors. So the benefits of it are going to probably keep adapting and changing, and we probably won't see the major benefits till the end of that program. But I see some of the reports we get, and you'd have to say it is spotting things that we wouldn't have spotted until someone's house was a foot underwater. So it is more proactive, and if we can do more of that and basically stop those events from happening, then it's a good thing, really.
Great, thanks for that, Danny.
Danny, would you say then that one of the sort of like areas of concern would be the amount of people in the industry that can understand it all? Because there's an industry, I mean, I've been around for 30 years, so I'm a little bit older than most, but we seem to have lost a lot of the people that really understand all of this information, how it all links together. Or do you think that there is a new cohort of people coming through that can?
I'd say, Gary, from the various discussions we've had on these types of topics, not just in wastewater, in other areas as well, where it's worked well, it isn't necessarily the fact that there's people missing. They're just not included. So yeah. I think what tends to happen at the moment is this is almost seen as a data IT type solution. So you can quite often end up with quite a lot of data analysts involved, but without the core competence and knowledge of what that engineering data actually means. And I think when we've sat together as an industry, I've been on a couple of meetings about these types of things. The one thing that keeps sort of being repeated is when companies have made this successful, it's by opening it up to all of their disciplines. So it isn't just operational technology by a country mile. It's definitely not just IT, but it's having your hydraulics, your mechs, because there's other there's other wins in this. You know, I can sit on a call finding, and they have concluded this work's going in the networks, but you think, well, actually, it could probably impact you, and maybe some of the data you get from your screens we could be a bit better with as well. So there's a lot to learn, and I think the industry's kind of it's doing the right thing. It's kind of jumping in with both feet. I think that's what I'm seeing from most companies. It's they're all going for it, but there's also got to be that period, I think, where we kind of sort of take a breath and pull everyone in and make sure everyone's on it together, because otherwise you don't want, I know it's a big silo, but you don't want to do, say, wastewater networks as one big silo, and then forget that actually some of that is applicable to your pumping stations or your screens, or, you know, we've had a good one earlier about CSOs. So it's good. I think we've all still got a lot to learn, but can only do it working together.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. We are approaching the end of our time. We do have one point that I'm just going to read out from Rob Stevens, and he says he agrees with Danny and Gary about how important people are in all of this, but what you need is a system that relies on people as little as possible. That means robust systems, innovative sensors systems. People run the systems, but not the other way around, and I think that's a really important point, actually. We absolutely do need that knowledge within the sector, that upskilling of staff and everything, but to have that technology and that data do the hard work for us, so other people can get on with their day-to-day jobs, really. So we have 3 minutes left, and I would like to say a very big thank you to Gary and to Stephen for their great presentations and for the contribution to the discussion as well. We do have some upcoming events that I hope people will tune into. So we have the next webinar, which is on the 23rd of March next year, and we have a further webinar planned for July. We have our Zero Pollution Conference on the 14th of September 2022, and I very much hope that will be in person, but obviously we just have to wait and see for that one. But we want that to be a really interactive session, really great discussions with everyone, and obviously in person would be best. So thank you very much for everyone for joining today. Thank you everyone for their questions and comments. It's been really great. And I just wish everyone a very happy Christmas and a wonderful New Year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.